Ash Regan is here. Ash Regan, good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
Not bad at all. Good to talk to you. It sounds like to me, I think I'm right in saying that you don't have the NHS app in Scotland that we have in England, do you?
No.
Oh, it doesn't work. Do you have one? Is there one at all or not? There's no NHS Scotland app.
Not that I've used. I usually just, I'm quite old-fashioned. I usually just phone up the surgery in the morning if I need an appointment.
Right. No, absolutely. No, it's just because it's happened to come up today that there's been a lot of errors being made in people's sort of medical records and people can't really quite understand it. But let's go back to something that happened a little while ago, the fallout as well from the Supreme Court ruling about what a woman is, which seems to confuse an awful lot of people, not least the NHS again.
Yes, I mean, it was big news. Not just in Scotland, I guess, but across the UK when there's three, I'm sort of calling them ordinary Scottish mums, but I guess they could be further from the truth, really, of campaigners that really took on the Scottish Government over this issue and fought them all the way to the Supreme Court and won. I mean, it's extraordinary time. I was in the room in Edinburgh where we were watching a live link with the Supreme Court. And I think I preferred to be there because they'd been warned at the Supreme Court they weren't allowed to react. They had to just sit there really quietly. Right. Whereas you'll have seen the scenes in Edinburgh, people, were crying and celebrating and so on. So it was a big deal. And we really felt like, I mean, in some ways, it shouldn't have ever come to this. We shouldn't have had to have wasted so much time, energy and money to really get back to where we started. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that the definition of men and women would be based on the biological definition. Well, so it's crazy that we've got here. But we thought, I suppose we probably shouldn't be this naive now, that this would somehow galvanise the Scottish Government, that they would hold up their hands and say, OK, we apologise, we got this wrong and we're going to fix it. Yeah. Of course, that's not what's happened. So the government have set out, really, they're using the EHRC as a deflector shield at the moment. Yeah. They can't do anything until they're the regulator of the law in this area, that they can't do anything until they get advanced guidance from them. Yeah. But they don't need to wait for that. And really, what's the point of having a government if they're not going to govern? Yes. What are they waiting for here? And, another thing that struck me recently is that obviously I was in that government, for quite a few years, and I resigned over this issue. Right. Because I just was not going to be in a position that I was going to vote for something that I thought was going to be damaging for, women and girls and their rights and their, dignity and safety. And yet the Scottish Government have been humiliated, roundly defeated in the highest court in the land. And no one has taken any accountability for that. Nobody's resigned. Nobody's apologised. It's quite astonishing, really, that we're at this point in public life where nobody takes accountability for anything. It's shocking. It
is shocking. And Nicola Sturgeon's been very quiet, hasn't she? I don't think she said anything at all. But even Labour in Westminster, you can see Keir Starmer's very uncomfortable still just even talking about it. And he couldn't bring himself to actually say the words, a trans woman is not a woman. He still hasn't said it. Instead he gave this ridiculous, mealy-mouthed nonsense at Prime Minister's questions and on television that, it gives us some very welcome clarity and we can now adjust the guidance going forward and all this kind of, robotic type speak. Instead of saying, as you said, just admit that you got it wrong before because you did. You thought that a trans woman was in fact a woman. It now turns out in law that that's not the case. But you can still be nuanced about it and say nobody's trying to prejudice anybody or discriminate against anybody who wants to live a life in the way that they want to live it. It's just that women's rights, I'm afraid, outstrip trans rights at this point.
Well, it's been balanced. What was happening was that trans rights were going above everybody else's rights. And all that's happened is it's just rebalanced so that everybody's rights are on the same level, which is as it should be. And I think that politicians that are not able to recognise that, and also the other thing that came from the Scottish Government was that they weren't acknowledging at any point that, women really had felt that their rights, as we were just saying, were on the line, that their rights were being removed. There's been a number of court cases up and down the country where women had been suspended from their jobs for complaining. We had that famous one quite recently, which is the Sandy Peggy case, where somebody that had a very long service had been suspended from their job just for saying that they were uncomfortable sharing a changing room with somebody of the opposite sex. Right. But there was no kind of recognition of the fact that women, had really felt like their rights were on the line. No one has been able to go there. And I think in terms of, we talk a lot these days about trust in politics, don't we? And about how the public are sort of turned off to politicians and some of the way that they speak. But this would be a good start, because I think there's a lot of people out there that think that politicians have been gaslighting them for the last few years with all this wokeisms.
Right.
It would be a good start for the politicians to say, and use plain language and just say, look, we got this wrong and we're going to move on from it. We've got other issues up here now. We've got Maggie Chapman. So she's in the Scottish Green Party.
Yes.
And yeah, so she was at a protest just after the Supreme Court ruling, where she was, it's on video, so we have.
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, saying that the Supreme Court was, demonstrating bigotry, hatred, prejudice, etc. So that did cause, a bit of a stooshy, as we would say,
Yes.
up here. But I think there's a wider issue here. So she sits on she's a deputy convener of a very important committee in Holyrood. So it's the Equalities and Human Rights Committee. And that is a committee that For Women Scotland, which is the group we were talking about that won at the Supreme Court, would probably be asked to attend, to give evidence, to talk about things, would be giving evidence in certain inquiries and so on. They've said they won't attend that committee if Maggie Chapman is still on there. So we've got an issue there. But she managed to survive a vote to remove her a couple of days ago, but she did actually vote for herself. So it's, again, we've got a situation where that committee also presided over the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which was also obviously struck down. And the same people are on that committee. So I think that the people that are on that committee, would say, oh, we've scrutinised things and they've got this wrong over and over and over again, and they need to go.
Yeah, they really do. And she tries to sort of weasel herself out of it, didn't she, by saying, she wasn't talking about the court, she was talking about some of the people that have said some of the things. And it was like, we know exactly what you were doing. It was very clear what she was doing. And unfortunately, a lot of these extremists, and I'm going to call them that because that's what they are never going to change their mind. And they don't care about the law. And maybe some of them just need to be arrested and charged with something so that they finally get it,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, certainly what we've seen from members of the Green Party, I would say is quite extremist ideology that they're talking about. And also the way they've been allowed to talk about these things. And it has emboldened them because, you get away with something and then you go a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. I believe now she has gone too far and there needs to be some kind of consequence.
And they need to rein it in. Yeah, absolutely right. Ash, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Good to see you. Ash Regan, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern from the ALBA party.